2, 1.
7 things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Sunday segment.
In today's episode, there are new grave warnings about the climate crisis, why the happiest countries are actually quite sad, and a new fishy alternative to plastic. But first, it was on this day in 1930 that bird's eye frozen foods went on sale for the first time. With the help of indigenous Canadians, Clarence Birdseye perfected his technique for freezing fresh fish that would revolutionise the food industry forever. Ongoing and widespread flooding is devastating parts of eastern Australia. As the country continues to battle this wave of floods, climate scientists have warned that the country, among others, is at a precipice. Human-caused climate change is increasing the risk of this kind of event, and now a dire warning comes from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They say over 3 billion people, nearly half of the planet's population, are living in harm's way because of global warming. Here's UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
I've seen many scientific reports in my time, but nothing like this. Today's IPCC report is an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. With fact upon fact, this report reveals how people on the planet are getting clobbered by climate change.
Even if temperature rises are limited to the best-case scenario of 1.5 degrees Celsius, the UN predicts unavoidable and irreversible impacts on humans, animals and the ecosystem we all rely on. And as the flooding and storms that hit the UK last month show, this isn't a warning limited to faraway places. In this country we might need better land management, more flood defence, or even moving some communities away from the water altogether. Still, the report warns that as climate change drives food and water scarcity, some people and places have already been pushed beyond their ability to adapt. COP26 PresidentWill Sharma described this as another stark warning for humanity.
And what this report says to us is that the impact on lives, on livelihoods and nature are far worse than were originally anticipated. And not only that, but those who are affected the most disproportionately are those who are most vulnerable.
Those vulnerable communities need more help from rich nations everywhere, at the same time that global efforts to reduce carbon emissions are stepped up. It's an enormous challenge we must all rise to. This week, a lorry full of satellite internet dishes from Elon Musk's company Starlink arrived in Ukraine. This follows the Deputy Prime Minister's tweet from Musk's help after Vladimir Putin's unprovoked invasion has left parts of the country without internet connection. According to Elon Musk, Starlink service is now operational in the country, but before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly is Starlink and how does it work? We spoke to technology correspondent Will Guyatt to understand just that.
So this is a new generation satellite internet service. Elon Musk's been working on it with SpaceX for a number of years, and satellite internet until this point has been a bit crap. It's used in areas where you can't get any other kind of signal. But what Elon Musk has decided is he's putting about 2,000 satellites up into space because space is currently unregulated, so he can throw as many as he wants up there. And they're at a low orbit, so they're at about 300 miles. And that means this is going to deliver much faster internet. It's in such an early stage at the moment, though, that people are seeing speeds of about 200 meg down and about 20 to 50 up, which is pretty good if you haven't got signal from anywhere else.
So how will this help Ukraine?
So the idea is if the internet in Ukraine, the infrastructure gets taken down, or let's say it becomes under the same strict controls as the internet is in Russia, people will be able to use, if they've got the equipment, the receivers and the kit, they'll be able to broadcast, pick up internet from the sky, internet which isn't bound by any state or government's rules or considerations of what the internet should be in terms of censorship.
What does this mean for ordinary Ukrainians? Will they be able to access it easily, or do they need one of Elon's fancy discs?
They're talking about having repeater stations and other sorts of systems built on the ground, which aren't actually available for people who buy this service to use yet. So I'm not entirely sure how they're going to work. But the idea is they will be able to build a network of connections in the Ukraine and enable people to use the internet when other services get compromised or taken down. And from what I understand, understand so far, the first handful of people who've got access to this are getting pretty good speeds, enough to stream live video, to do TV broadcasts and those kind of things, and share information from areas where the internet's otherwise been lost. Getting a satellite service and getting kit into an area like that is no mean feat. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, because some tech experts are really concerned that the fact that you have to get up onto roofs to put these dishes and stuff, and they can essentially, if a plane is flying over, it can reflect information back onto the plane. People do worry that these could become targets for Russian bombers. That's the one concern about this technology being rolled out.
Well, it might be early days yet, but despite his track record, it looks like Elon's really delivered on his promises this time. Still to come on the Sunday 7, how pressure to be happy could actually be making us sad, and a curious case of the UK's bat-eating spider. Whether you're scrolling through the gram or flickering the channels, one thing becomes very clear. Everyone's trying to portray themselves as though they're 100% happy all the time. Our obsession with happiness and positivity is a relatively modern phenomenon, and ironically, it could be the very thing making us unhappy.
I'm Egon Dejonckheere. I investigate the impact of societal norms or cultural factors on personal well-being.
As part of a study, Ergon and his team wanted to see how societal pressure to pursue happiness was cultural and varied between countries. Ironically, the team found that the predicted effects of social pressure to be happy was higher in countries that score highly on the World Happiness Index.
And what we found was that in countries higher on the World Happiness Index, if you experience a lot of pressure in those countries to be happy, then you report poorer well-being. And this relation was not true in countries that scored lower on the World Happiness Index. If you live in a very happy country, you're surrounded by a lot of happy individuals that seemingly comply to this very stringent emotion norm to be happy all the time. And if you yourself feel that you cannot comply to that prevailing emotion standard to always be happy and not to be negative, then you feel like you are an outsider because everybody else seemingly complies, but you yourself cannot. That social comparison process may actually make it more salient that you yourself are not able to comply to that norm. And that could actually explain why in the end you even feel worse. And it has paradoxical negative consequences for your well-being.
So we've got happy countries with unhappy people. Surely that means we need to approach happiness and positivity in a different way.
I think so, yes, because now in modern societies, we have a very one-sided focus on happiness and positive feelings in general. So there's this implicit but also explicit message that we should always try to be happy or pursue happiness, while negative feelings are often regarded as maladaptive or bad for our mental health, while they clearly also have a valuable, there is value to negative emotions. The value of these negative emotions is often not very well communicated in modern societies. There could be value in actually trying to embrace positive feelings as well. So we kind of have a more balanced view of our emotions where we pay attention to both positive and negative.
So where do we go from here then? How can we strive to lead happy lives without falling into this trap?
I would say that we should more focus on the value of negative emotions, not only for ourselves, but also for others. If we see another person displaying negativity, he or she had a bad day or something negative happened, then we can actually, instead of trying to say cheer up or look at the bright side of things or don't worry, be happy, instead of having those claims about their emotional life, we could also say, that really sucks for you. Like, I feel you, and we relate to these negative feelings. That would be my suggestion there. There's nothing wrong with happiness, of course, because happiness relates to a lot of positive outcomes. Happier people tend to live longer even. They have more friends, they tend to earn more, and etc. So it has a lot of good things associated to it. But I think it shouldn't be a goal in itself. Rather, it should be the byproduct of trying to live a meaningful life, doing things that you actually like, rather than focusing on this happiness goal per se. If we try to focus on trying to be happy all the time, if we try to focus on that less, then I think in the end it will have better consequences for our well-being.
Scientists in Ireland have published the first record of a noble false widow spider feeding on a protected species of bat in the UK. The new study, titled Web Slinger vs Dark Knight, I'd watch that film, shows the false widow spiders continue to have an impact on native species of bat. It marks the first time any species of false widow spider has ever been recorded preying on mammals.
A member of the public actually noticed a bat being entangled in a web in a house in the UK and posted a picture on social media. And my postdoc, so John Dunbar, actually contacted that person and tried to know more about the story and what really happened. And we actually understood very quickly that this was a first.
That's Dr. Michel Dugon. He led the research team.
What's very interesting here is that the spider actually set its web just below the bat roost. And so young bats that are trying to fly have that possibility to fall on that web. And then the spider, which is actually quite small in size, produce that extremely strong web and manage to hoist this prey that is several hundred times its own weight, and then wrap it in silk so it is preserved from any kind of other predators, and then bites it, injects it with venom, and start to consume it.
Originating from Madeira and the Canary Islands, the noble false widow has the potential to become one of the world's most invasive species of spider.
Those kind of observations are actually essential to our understanding of the noble false widow, which is an invasive species. We already observed this species of spider feeding on the native and protected viviparous lizard, which is the only species of reptiles we have in Ireland. Now to actually notice that those spiders are capable of feeding on fairly large mammals as well is a very important discovery, because it shows once again their disruptive potential in these habitats where they do not belong.
Still to come on the Sunday 7, the future of flying cars is just around the corner, and the special link between hearing and memory. Right after this. You're listening to the Sunday 7. Follow us for your weekday news espresso, or even try our Island edition. It's in all the usual places. Our hearing is often something we take for granted, whether it's the sound of a loved one's laugh, birds chirping, or your favourite song on the radio. It plays a vital role in our lives, not just for listening to music or communicating, but also for our emotional well-being and memory. New research from Specsavers shows just how important sound is for our memory and emotional well-being. It reveals that for 11% of us, sounds trigger happy memories for them every day, with 41% admitting this happens a couple of times a week. For anyone who has that one tune that takes them back in time, this shouldn't come as any surprise. Claire Maddocks is a qualified neurologic music therapist from the British Association for Music Therapy, and she says the results from this new research is an important part of the work she does.
So what they found was that out of all the senses, sound is the one that's most able to trigger happy memories. A third of people said sound can help trigger happy memories, and 8 in 10 reported that music can uplift their mood unexpectedly. And the reason for this really kind of comes down to how our brains perceive music.
So how does sound actually trigger memories then?
Basically, the more you listen to a piece of music, the more your brain remembers the predictability of the music. It remembers, where that beat's going to drop, or it remembers where there's sort of changes. And while your brain is essentially taking in this information, it's also noting sort of, where am I, what am I doing, and what are the emotions that I'm feeling. So this is why when we hear a song on the radio that perhaps we've not heard for a really long time, it can take us back to a key moment in our lives. So maybe a wedding, or maybe a phase of our life. And actually 70% of people say that their favourite song can take them back to key moments. So there's a very powerful link between music and our brain.
So in order to keep on having these positive associations with music, we should probably be protecting our hearing. Sehembey is an audiologist, and she explains why our hearing health is so important and how you can go about protecting it.
2/3 of people, so about 64% of people, said that losing their hearing would impact their mental health. And if we combine that with the relationship between sound and memory and the link between hearing loss and dementia, we need to do everything that we can to protect and preserve our hearing. We can do that through having regular hearing checks, making sure we don't listen to music or the TV too loudly, and ensuring we wear hearing protection when we're going to be surrounded by loud noises. If you're listening to music through headphones, having it at a reasonable volume. A lot of smartphones will now tell you what the acceptable volume is when you've got headphones in. If you don't have that facility, then just limiting the amount of time that you have the headphones on or you have the music playing, and just getting your hearing checked on a regular basis. I think sometimes it's just as simple as being able to just check the levels of your hearing, maybe on a 2-yearly basis.
This is like something out of the Jetsons. This Swedish company has built a fully electric flying car that they say anyone can fly. Describing it as a jet ski for the skies, the all-electric personal pleasure craft car can have you airborne for up to 20 minutes and is on the market for a mere €80,000.
We founded the company in my double garage.
That was company co-founder Peter Ternstrom.
And then we decided to build a kind of like a big drone where you can actually sit in it and fly instead of just remote controlling it. So that was the first idea, and it took us I think about 6 months before we had something that actually could fly. It wasn't very pretty. It looked a little bit like a flying ladder with a sports seat on top, but it did fly actually. We thought that this was going to be really easy. I mean, Thomas Patton is a brilliant engineer, and he has been building drones since 2008. But it was much more difficult than we thought. We had all kinds of trouble when it comes to matching the correct motor with the correct propeller size, propeller inclination, the width of the cables. That we needed really thick cables for this, and we didn't know that from the beginning. For the Jetson 1, we are not aiming to be something that you can use for a daily commute in the city or anything like that. The Jetson 1 is like a jet ski for the skies. It's made so you can have fun. An aircraft of this type, because it doesn't weigh so much, it weighs less than 250 pounds, you don't need a pilot's license to fly it in the United States. But you can't fly it, you can't hop between skyscrapers on Manhattan. You have to stay out of densely populated areas and also far away from airports. Our mission, long-term goal, is to make big cities much better places to live in. By 2050, we're going to have 7 billion people on the planet, which is 70% of the people are going to be living in large metropolises. Traffic jams are going to be one of the biggest challenges. We are removing lots of cars from the streets. Cities are going to be a much greener place. There's lots of positive things from an environment perspective with the revolution and the advent of the flying car. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
It's no secret that the world's facing a huge plastic problem, and correcting it requires a fundamental change in thinking about how plastics are made, used and discarded. Now, one company thinks that lobster shells could form part of this solution. Instead of relying on crude oil, the crustacean shells contain a polymer called chitin that can be transformed into a biodegradable plastic. Amir Afshar is the co-founder of the Shellworks and explains the process.
The first step is that we take lobster shells, we crush them up, and then we use an acid and alkali solution to strip away mineral and protein layers to get at the chitin nanofibers. We can then add that chitin sand powder to household vinegar, and that gives us a bioplastic solution. And then we use that solution with our custom-made machines to be able to form three-dimensional things.
As some 500 billion plastic bags are used globally each year, the hope is that this new solution can make a large dent in plastic use and pollution. This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend. Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.